Hi everyone, we're now going to be talking about a language called jQuery. Now jQuery is actually not a language on its own, it's just a wrapper or a bunch of libraries which we can use on top of JavaScript. So whenever you've probably heard jQuery in some context, it's not anything crazy, it's just a way to provide easy functionality that we could also do in JavaScript, but it would just take a lot more writing and it wouldn't look as clean. So jQuery is just another thing on top of JavaScript. JavaScript can do everything that jQuery can do, but jQuery only works with JavaScript. So the way that we get jQuery into our page is we have to actually go and download it. So let's actually go to jQuery on Google. First link looks great. Let's download. So I'm just going to say download the uncompressed development version. So there it is. And now you want to drag that into our folder with everything. So here I'm just going to rename it to jQuery.js. All the other stuff doesn't really matter. And now what we want to do is actually import that into our page. Now in the past, we never really talked about the order in which we import things. It was like we can import Bootstrap, then index.css. But now, because we're going to use jQuery in index.js, we actually want to import jQuery before index.js because it's a dependency. So before it, I'm going to put script source equals jQuery.js, and we'll import it there. So now we have access to all of the jQuery functionality. Now jQuery, like I said, allows us to do some things a lot easier, and it also much more exemplifies the event-based programming nature of JavaScript. So I'm going to get rid of this code from last time. And so the first thing we want to do is have a function which runs when the page loads. Now this is critical because as you'll realize, the way, as we talked about in the first lecture on how the internet works, the server basically sends a bunch of files like the HTML, it sends the JavaScript, it sends the CSS. But the thing is that the browser, which is what renders all of those files, renders them not necessarily in the order that we want or in an order which is good. So in our JavaScript code, we're going to do things like every time we click on this post, do something. But that post actually has to exist on the page before the JavaScript can run. So if our JavaScript runs before the page is loaded, which could happen in some scenarios, then it's going to be no good because it won't be able to connect to the different parts of the pages that aren't loaded. So what we want to do is actually run our code when the page is loaded. The way that you do that is that you select the page. The way that you select something in jQuery is by doing $ parentheses and then the name of the thing that we want to select. So here we're going to do document. So when the document is ready, so that's the .ready function. And then it's a function which takes in another function. So I'm going to call it onPageReady, function onPageReady. And this is the function that's going to run when the page is ready. So I tell it to do that by putting it in here. So just to make sure this works, why don't we just print out 42. So basically, so far what we've done is we've selected the document. We've said when the document is ready, we want to run this function. So let's actually go open up the console and reload our page. And look at that. It basically printed out 42. So that's great. So now, why don't we make it something simple, like every time we click on a post, it actually pops up and says that you clicked on the post. So the way that you do that is we have to select all the posts and define a click handler. So the way that you select an item in the document is through the CSS selector. So here, notice how each of the posts has the panel class. So what we can do is essentially select the panel class and define the click handler. So like I said, it's the CSS selector, which goes inside the $. So you put it in quotes, and so it's a class, so it's a dot. Remember, this is what we do in CSS, and then a dot panel. So we're selecting every single panel on the page, or rather anything that has the panel class, and then I want to say what happens when I click on it. So I'm going to say dot click. And just like on the .ready, we have to give it a function to run when it clicks. So I'm going to say function when panel clicked. And we basically want this function to go in here. So let's say that when the panel is clicked, all we do is say alert, you clicked on a panel. So this is pretty straightforward, and as you can tell, the syntax is very natural to event-based programming because we select something, we say what the event is, and we say what function to run when that event happens. So now, if I reload my page, if I click on this, it says, you clicked on a panel. Click on this, it'll say that. And for all of these panels, notice how it says it. If I click outside, it doesn't. And if I click inside, it does. So far, what we've done is we've run code when the page loads, and then we've selected parts of the page and defined click handlers for those parts. So this was a basic overview to how jQuery works. There's a bunch of different things that you can do. So if I go to here, let's go to API documentation. Notice how there's all of these different event handlers that you can do on an element that you select. And remember that you select it with the CSS selector. So there's all these things you can do, and pretty much anything that you want to do, just Google it and say jQuery, and then there's probably someone out there who's tried it and you can learn from. So this was our basic intro to jQuery, and with that, we've essentially finished most of the functionality for our personal website that we wanted to get through. Remember that thus far we've gotten an introduction to how the internet works. We've looked at the way that HTML structures the page. We looked at CSS and how to style the page, and then specifically at a CSS framework called Bootstrap and how it can give us a lot of nice functionality. Then we looked at how JavaScript works, and finally using jQuery, which is a JavaScript wrapper on top of that. So with all of that, this is going to wrap up the portion where we actually develop our website. The next video or two is going to be using a tool called GitHub to actually serve and publish our website onto the internet so that we can send it to whoever we want to through a URL.